Hello, and welcome to the Rock Metal Podcast. I'm your host, John Harris, and today on Rock Metal Podcast, we have Epoch of, and you said it was Chirality?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, because initially I said Chirality, and then Rich, who is with us today to share more information about this album, Nucleosynthesis, out in July of 2021, said Chirality. So I'm like, okay, good thing I asked.
Yeah.
And if anybody in the comments wants to, correct both of us, I guess please do so. And so Rich is on the show today. We've also got Avila the Believer, my Vives, my beautiful little lady who's going to be taking some notes for us today. So Rich, welcome to the show.
Hi. Hello. Yeah, good to be with you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely great to have you on. Now, sci-fi metal, how could you say no to that? Unless, of course, it sucks, but it doesn't suck. So
thank you.
You're quite welcome. Take us through this record. Even she's excited about the record. I'm excited about the record. Nucleosynthesis. Yeah. Is it a concept album? Is there a story with a protagonist?
There was going to be. So I started out with quite grand plans. I had a sort of a background story that I was going to write, which I sort of had imagery for. So each of the songs kind of is like a chapter in the story, but I haven't got around to writing the actual story yet. So it's kind of like a soundtrack that doesn't have a movie or doesn't have like an actual book about it or something at the moment. But I wouldn't say it was a concept album in terms of like lots of ideas. It's more like a lot of pictures that I have in my head that I kind of found, well, if I can get this out in musical form, that's a great way of being able to actually, convey how my brain works to other people. Mm-hmm. So it's been pretty interesting figuring out how my brain works and trying to get that out. So yeah, and I love sci-fi, I love metal, and there's not actually, as far as I know, anything that's kind of like this that's out there. There's a lot of bands that do, sci-fi themed albums, maybe like the pictures are sci-fi or like the song titles or the lyrics are sci-fi. But I've actually gone for, take some classic sci-fi soundtracks and ideas and like really try and get that in there. So it's not just metal, it's kind of sci-fi soundscapes with metal stuff in it.
Mm-hmm. So many
I could go on.
Yeah, no, please do. Otherwise, I have to start asking questions. And I know that's my job, but that's the worst part of this job, Rich, is having to come up with a question to ask you. But you gave lots of really good information, such as thinking about how my brain works. But it sounds like you think in pictures, and I don't know the proper name for that, but there is a proper name for somebody who thinks visually. So I guess take us through that. How do you take thinking in pictures or visually and then turn that into music, which the crazy thing obviously about music is we can't see it, we can't touch it, we can't smell it, but we can certainly feel it, we can certainly hear it, which is a cool thing in itself. I don't know, what do you call that? Kinetic or kinesthetic? So
yeah.
Take us through that. How did you go from pictures to headbanging?
Well, I suppose the thing is, because the thing with music is like everyone sort of shares a sort of database of the kind of feelings and the imagery that comes up with music. If I played you some horror music, that would kind of conjure up images. I don't need to tell you exactly what to look at, but the music kind of translates you, sort of puts you into that realm. So what I was doing is I've got an image in my head. So say it's a sci-fi, I've got like a image of like a desolate planet or something. I see that, and then I try and think like, if I was watching a movie for that, what would that sound like? Like what kind of instruments, what kind of, musical concepts and stuff like that. So part one is trying to think, what are the feelings that I would like and that side of it, and then actually thinking like, how do I make music that's also going to stir up these feelings in other people? So it's a lot of different kind of small steps, and if people listen to the music and they can actually kind of get in their head what I had in my head, then that's sort of the mission complete, because it's actually managing to, it's crazy really. It's somehow telepathically almost like, boom it over and try and get people to realize the same thing that I'm thinking.
That almost sounds like alien stuff.
Yeah, good question. I'll have to have a think about that.
Yeah, telepathically communicating with people you don't even know. This sounds like alien stuff, Rich.
That's the plan, yeah. World domination, step by step.
Step by step, day by day. Well, you were already into sci-fi stuff. So I was going to ask if, the apparent alien discovery. Oh, hey, sweetie. So Gabe's a Babes, assistant engineer of the Rock Metal Podcast, is going to come take his sister. So so I can get my notes back because she erased all of my notes. So I am just winging it right now. I hope everybody...
That's fine. I'm winging it too.
Sweet. So I hope... Oh, she even changed my Google Calendar over to the Western Sahara side of life. So thank you, everybody out there, for your patience. And Rich, thank you so much for yours.
It's okay.
Now... we were asking questions about sci-fi stuff because last year the U.S. government said, "Hey, aliens are real," and people went, "Who cares? We're in a pandemic. We have other things to worry about."
Yeah.
But did that inspire you at all? Did you care?
I've tend to stop listening a lot recently, to be honest. Like there's enough other things that you can escape to, especially during the pandemic. I mean, that's something that's definitely driven me a little bit. So I've mainly just been trapped here in my flat on my own. So actually delving more into different sci-fi that I haven't read before and watching new movies, it's been a good time for that, as well as actually having the time to record this album. It would have taken a lot longer if the pandemic wasn't on and I actually had a social life and things to be doing. I suppose I wouldn't say the pandemic itself kind of featured, but definitely it took me down some different paths mentally, I think. Like as the album went on, I found myself things got quite dark and very, intense, whereas they might have been a bit lighter and, slightly different if the world had been normal when I was recording it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, like I was chatting with somebody the other day recently that it was like a fun time to the pandemic. We didn't know it, but in retrospect, there was a point in the pandemic early on where it was like camping out, and like we were going to band together like humanity, and we were going to save each other, and we were going to do the right thing for 2 weeks. And then somehow it turned into toilet paper shortages, and then that was kind of fun still, actually. I would take the toilet paper shortage, to be perfectly honest, over what's going on now. But it took such a freaking turn that it doesn't surprise me that things got a little dark. So how did it get dark? What happened? I mean, I know you mentioned that the story doesn't have a movie yet. It's a soundtrack without a movie. But take us through what's the arc in this soundtrack? Is there an arc?
Yeah. I mean, initially, I kind of came up with like a very generic kind of playing field. So, I mean, I was thinking about a guy that travels to a distant planet in the future, because that gives you lots of possibilities, and kind of each of the songs is about him arriving. So like Dawn of Chirality, it starts kind of like dawn on a new planet, and then it goes into a couple of songs. It's about him arriving in a city and then escaping the city and going into the desert, and then sort of finding some alien technology and like things starting to get a bit weird. So like around the middle songs, it starts going a bit more crazy sci-fi. And then I wouldn't say that I had like an exact image of how it was all going to end, but I mean, it was things were sort of growing in scale from like little ideas of just someone wandering around and doing stuff to sort of universal planetary size things. So like with the Abyssal Fleet, like that song is very much like it's almost like a Star Wars type affair, where it's got a lot of brass and like horns and like big drums and stuff like that. So it's sort of growing in the size of all of the music. And also I was kind of thinking in like terms of sort of the desperation of the main character. So like which I think was possibly me during the lockdown. I would definitely say that things started to get slightly darker, and I became more of a like recluse through no option really. So that kind of translated into the album of things getting darker and a lot more intensity in the tracks, a lot more dense music. and not just everything floating around, but really kind of hitting you. So, and I think it definitely built that way towards the end of the album, which sort of was recorded chronologically. So I think you can hear that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you make it out to a studio, or did you record basically where you're sitting right now?
So I recorded everything here. I did use Tower Studio, which is in the south of France, and they reamped some of the guitar tracks and the bass tracks, and they did the mixing and the mastering. But yeah, literally in terms of recording, did it all here. So I've got a guitar, bass, 2 keyboards over here. I've got an electronic drum kit. But yeah, it can be done. I literally have recorded an album in my living room, and then just spoke to the studio remotely, and they did little bits and pieces, but all just done remotely. So yeah, pandemic didn't actually affect things too much in that respect. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
I think if this pandemic had happened 20 years ago, I think the music industry would have been hit harder.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've been doing has been on. I mean, everything I've been doing is online distribution, because I don't have a physical presence myself yet. I've got physical merch, but I don't have gigs or anything that I play. So it's only possible through the internet, which is kind of what made me do it in the first place. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a cool time to be a musician, even though things are changing and like people complain about the music industry, but there are definitely alternatives that you can do. You just got to adapt to it, which I think is kind of what people are doing at the moment.
Yeah, well, I always complain about the music industry. It's great because you get to work with musicians, but it's awful because you get to work with musicians.
Yeah, I can get that.
All right, you mentioned you've been watching some new sci-fi movies. So for all the sci-fi heads out there, what have you been watching? What sparks your fancy? I'll be honest, I don't watch sci-fi stuff like my dad did, so I was exposed to Star Trek more so than Star Wars. And I know that there's a thing between those two. And Teen Titans Go recently did an episode where they explained it, that Star Trek, I guess to them, is really boring, and Star Wars is really exciting. So that's kind of how they had divvied it up. But I guess without going into Star Trek versus Star Wars, what have you been watching, and what kind of sci-fi movies are you into?
Well, I guess I grew up on definitely Star Wars and a lot of the sort of sci-fi TV shows as well. So like Doctor Who and stuff like that. Obviously, being from Britain is quite a large thing, and everyone kind of knows everyone from the show. And then I guess in terms of also books, I've read things like Peter F. Hamilton. Has been a while now. I have to dig out some names, but I guess also movies like John Carpenter and the sort of big Hollywood names. John Carpenter's a big inspiration because he's also done the soundtracks as well. So a lot of his movies, he's done his own soundtracks, which I've then sort of stolen the imagery and the music from to make my own. So that's a good one. I suppose recently I've been watching The Expanse as well on one of the online streaming platforms, which is pretty cool. It's pretty like hard sci-fi, like trying to make things realistic. Like if something shoots you when you're in a spaceship in space, it doesn't explode. Like people get sucked out through the holes and things like that.
That would make sense.
Yeah, and also quite big into gaming as well. So things like No Man's Sky, which is just really big kind of sandbox game where you can build stuff. And I say that I draw from everything really. It doesn't have to be a particular movie or like music or something. It's because it all kind of puts images in your head. I can grab them from different places and sort of mix them up. So
those images,
there's always something new. Yeah.
Tricky question. Does it bother you? Like if there was a scene and a spaceship went by and they had a fire and it exploded instead of imploded, does that bother you? Because it doesn't bother me. I could care less because I know it's a movie and it's not real anyway.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of maybe prefer the explosion because, it's a movie. You gotta, I don't know. It looks maybe a little bit better. Explosions are cool, but
yeah.
Does that bother you? I know it bothers some people.
Well, as long if it's when people start believing that things are true, then it gets annoying. But when it's a movie, everything's cooler with sound effects and explosions. So definitely have no problem with that. But for myself, I've actually come from a also kind of physics background. So like I know the technicalities of stuff, but it's just art is art. So it's good to know what can happen and then just twist it round to whatever you want to do, really. So it doesn't really annoy me.
Okay, cool. There may also be budget constraints in trying to construct an implosion instead of an explosion. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, complications. Yeah.
Serious complications. Speaking of complications, you have a track called Labyrinth. That sounds like a complication.
Definitely. Where to start? I mean, it's probably the most complicated song on the album. So because it was one of the last that I recorded, ended up having, I'd say, about 60 tracks that I sent away when I actually had them being mixed. So, and many different sections. So like there was about 60 tracks, but some of it might only be for like 5 seconds or 10 seconds. So there might be a section that's got like lots of different synthesizers, or there might be a section that's got like pretty much an entire orchestra. So like the strings and the horns and all of the drums. And I think that I just as I got into recording, really, it's like all of the songs took about the same amount of time to record. They just, as I got better at stuff, I just added more and more complexity to it. But I would say that one is probably my favorite in terms of like it actually flows very smoothly, and like it's sort of like a whole movie in itself. Like it's got a lot of sections that kind of fit in. They don't seem to jump around as much as maybe some of my earlier songs did.
Okay. Did you have any feelings where you got to the end and you're like, man, I'm really good at this. Maybe I should go back and do it all over again. But then you just end up in an endless cycle of Kaizen where you get better, and then you're like, oh, I should do it again. But then you secretly get better, and then I should do it again. But then you secretly get better. Did that happen?
I would say in a given song that would happen, but by the time that I'd finished a song and like put it to one side, I'd kind of had enough of it. Like the last thing that I wanted to do was go back and open up that beast again. So it definitely can happen, but I think also I don't really stop working until things don't annoy me anymore. So usually when I park a song, I'm content with it.
Yeah.
So I won't. I mean, the other thing is I don't really have any deadlines because I'm independent. I don't have a record company saying like we need it by this date. So I have the freedom to decide when it's finished. But I tend to not be able to put things aside until they are at a certain level. So that kind of avoids that. But it's sort of perfectionism in a way. And I try and record a song in like a block of time. So I'm not doing a song that I've started, 6 months ago that I'm then going back to. I try and get one song done at a time, which kind of also helps that, I would say.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know if it's perfectionism, maybe excellence, because perfectionism, you'd still be working on the album. You'd be like, and you wouldn't want to hand it off to other people to amp and mix and master, because you just has to be done right. So you would want to do it all yourself. So yeah, striving for excellence. And I just imagine you in like a very posh, pompous sort of way, just being like, you don't annoy me anymore. And then you move on to the next one.
That's it. Yeah. I've got my little, I've got a hammer that I slam down. It's like, you're done.
Yeah.
Move over.
Boom. Official government stamp. Done.
Yeah.
You mentioned not being on a label. Is that something you're looking for? Is that something that you're open to chatting with labels about? Maybe not for this release, but for future releases, et cetera, et cetera? Because you could have shopped this around, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I kind of got into this by being part of a sort of online community that's the Savvy Musician Academy, which is very much about how to empower people to be independent and not require a label. Because with the sort of state of some of the music industry, a lot of people they're kind of forced into it because you need the capital up front in order to be able to record stuff and the publicity, but then they don't have a say in how they go about things. So I'm not sure I'm looking for a label. I'd certainly consider it if people made me an offer, but my intention is basically to release things myself through the internet and doing my own PR mainly, but I have also worked with PR companies. I mean, I see the value in those guys. But yeah, I would say that if a company came up to me, I'd have to say, well, do you actually tick all the boxes that I need, or is it going to be more constraining than if I just did it myself? So It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one these days. I think it used to be a lot more straightforward. You needed that record label to get you out there, but like I was saying, with the internet as it is, I can sort of send things to people directly. I can get to them on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and it's a lot more easy to sort of directly get your music in front of people if you can find them.
Yeah, that is true. If you can find them. Alien Love Song, which is actually Steve Vai, which is a different artist, but I thought of that right now.
I do love Steve Vai, so that's always welcome.
Beautiful. Yeah, well, you found C Squared, so shout out really quickly to Curtis and Holly over at C Squared, who...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those guys did an amazing job. And also, having never released anything myself, just being able to go through that process with them was just really fun as well. Mm-hmm. And yeah, got some great coverage. So yeah, can't praise them enough.
Exactly. Sweet. Okay, well, I know some record labels that don't like to play the "we own everything" game. Obviously, they invest less because there's certain things like whoever pays for the recording, for example, owns the recordings. That's just how the law works, right? So, for yourself, a lot of labels are starting to get significantly more flexible, modern. They understand that the model has changed, that you can record yourself in your bedroom, find your own mix engineer, and even find your own PR company and book your own interviews and everything. So what I'll do, because you sounded like you're interested to chat about potentially where some gaps might be filled, wherever you're having gaps and whatnot. I'll get you in touch with a label that I like.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Have a chat. And if you like them, then great. And if you don't, then you're already on your path. So it doesn't really, I don't think it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, yeah, as I say, like I'm really pleased with what I've created so far, but I am totally new to the industry. So everything that I can check out and make decisions about, I'm always happy to look at things.
Exactamente. Groovy, baby. So we chatted about alien sound, sci-fi movies, the fun part of the pandemic when we didn't have any toilet paper, but we had everything else, and there were these giant gaps on store shelves where you could use any other number of paper products, but toilet paper specifically was just hard to find. We talked about Star Trek versus Star Wars, alien love songs, labyrinths. All of the links for today are in today's show notes, so if you are still listening in, which is statistically impossible, but if you are, then thank you. EPOCHofChirality.com will be available in the show notes down below, as well as links to Labyrinth and Pyramid Cybergod, and you can go ahead and check out everything that Rich is working on right now. So, Rich, thank you so much for coming on to the Rock Metal Podcast today.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been a real blast, and it's great to be able to actually communicate with people outside of my flat again. So, especially across the pond. So yeah.